towards the end of the year, we either navigate breakups, maybe we have more fights with our loved ones. So I thought it would be best to compile all of my favorite episodes that were super insightful on relationships with Ajit Nawalkha.
Most fights are pure emotion. It's completely emotional, and that's why it needs to be paused.
Sanaiyah, Gurnamal.
Everything took a big turn in my life when I started owning and taking responsibility for everything that was happening in my relationships. And I realized it's not them, it was me.
Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath.
If you don't actually recognize that your partner can leave you in any moment, then you're actually not with reality.
Teal Swan.
What we are doing right now as women is that we're literally stripping men of their place in this world. And this is where I get a little bit nervous.
I hope you truly learn from these incredible episodes. Hey loves, do me a quick favor and hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are tuning into this. It helps grow the show more than you know. Thank you so much again and enjoy. Hello, Brave Table fam. Welcome to another episode of The Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta, and this is your destination, your oasis to be all things just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. Now, friends, I know we are getting into the end of the year, and this can be a very special time for people. And I want to remind you, I have pulled one of my That's Like Now What conversation affirmation cards. Actually, these are my affirmation cards. So you can definitely get this for the holidays to connect with yourself. You can actually use one of these one per week, and it has a action step on the opposite side. And for now, for the holidays, it is 15% off with code HOLIDAY. And that's when you go to thatsucknowwhat.com. You can grab them for 15% off. All you have to do is put the code HOLIDAY and grab them. So I am the only one who determines how my story unfolds. I am the author of this new chapter. Yes, you are, friends. I know that a lot of times, and towards the end of the year, we either navigate breakups, we navigate wintering, we navigate having to confront certain situations. Maybe we have more fights with our loved ones. And so I thought it would be best to compile all of my favorite episodes. And these are ones from this past year, and some of the juicy ones that I thought that were super insightful on relationships, whether it's repairing conflict and whether it's some of them that I have done with my own love, Ajit Nawalkha. I thought that we would start with the first one, which is episode 228, Relationship Hacks Every Married Couple Must Know About, with Ajit Nawalkha. And here it is.
When so much is prioritized, love is deprioritized.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything else is getting prioritized. Not because it's by design, it just happens to be. And that's why it became hard.
People asked me this before, how do you work with your spouse? And how have you guys made it work?
Sometimes it has worked, sometimes it hasn't worked, just being real, at least from my perspective, and then you'd give your hot take on it. But I think the only way it works with partner is to have very clear boundaries to what you're going to do, what I'm going to do, and restate it again and again and again, even if it's annoying as hell. Is to say, you're the CEO of this business, so you're doing this, this, and this, and my job is this. And that's it.
100%.
And then stay out of each other's way, except asked to interject. I think the second rule that works for me is don't talk about work with me after X hours of the day, right? So if it is this time of the day, after that, unless it is like urgent, something's burning down, that's a different thing. Otherwise, don't talk to me about it. The third thing that has worked for me is set up time for work. Like, for example, we every day, pretty much every day, except for like Wednesdays or if it's a shoot day or something, we have a set time, 12:30 in the afternoon for 30 minutes. We check in, and that involves any work check-in that needs to happen. So it kind of gets it out of the way, and you don't have to ask the question, oh crap, when do I discuss this? And so it happens to not go home as frequently and as often as it would otherwise go. Those are some of the things that works for me, definitely. I do think the problem is if that's the only thing both of you have, it's going to be very hard and they'll always go home. And that's the thing that we don't have. We have our things, and then we have together things. And our things are our things. Nobody needs to interject and beat around on that. And our together things is where we discuss, and there's agendas and clarity and boundaries and everything. So it makes it easier.
And I think that in the beginning, we started doing small projects together. And, I'm the one that's like, oh my gosh, let's do everything together. I love spending time with you. I love figuring out new things and brainstorming. And then we're like, oh, okay. Then we had kids. We had one. And then we had another one. And then you're not sleeping. And then, shit hits the fan. And life happens. Things get, harder. So no, it's not going to be rainbows and roses all day. I don't want to sell anybody that dream, but I think it's a constant. We've prioritized communication so much. And I want to kind of bring up even, how we fight and what we've learned about repair and reconciliation.
Yeah. The way we fight now is when emotions are emotions, they're emotions. Like there's no way to regulate them until you're aware that they're happening. At least that's my perspective on it. And whenever you get aware of it, there's one of two responses. Either you calm down, that's what we do. At least either one of us calm down and both of us calm down, and then we can talk about it. But most of the time it's Hakuna Matata, because emotions are high, we are all racing on the emotion, and it's just not possible to talk in that moment. And so we would go Hakuna Matata, which effectively means let's talk about this later when we are more regulated and we can have a real conversation about it. And ideally that conversation happens within the day, or at least that's my experience of it. Usually me or you, whoever's ready first, kind of brings it back up and we say, let's talk about it now. And then we talk about it and talk about it like how one would talk about it. But it doesn't just go like, here is pointers to talk about. I think it goes, this is how you made me feel, or this is how I felt in that particular situation or in that particular event of conversation. And then we go into, okay, so what can we do about it, right? And what is the next good path from here? And that usually resolves pretty much any situation that we might have, because it doesn't come from you did this. It comes from, this is how I feel. This is how it's making me feel. And now let's work on, and it's for both of us.
Right.
I mean, not only me, but you also. And then it helps us really find a solution, because now we know how the other person is feeling versus, just something that is top of mind. And so you're going at it. It's like, no, what's the deep thing that's actually affecting the person?
And I feel like there's a way to bring things up. And I think that many times, most couples are fighting about finances, or why is the dirty laundry like at the end of the bed again, or why didn't you empty the dishwasher? I told you the 10th time, or the mom.
We don't fight for those things, surprisingly.
I know we don't fight for those things, but I kind of want to go into, we're not the perfect couple by any means, but I feel like
we're not fighting about dishwasher.
Yeah, no.
You shouldn't either.
But I think it's also because we value cleanliness at a...
Yeah, but I mean, this is a subtle comment on that's an easier issue to solve. Like,
right.
Okay, what is it behind the dishwasher problem? Find that, and you will not have that fight.
No, that's so true.
Fights a person
It's
can
a bigger
yeah.
fight. But most people fight about the finances.
Yes, finances.
That's a huge one.
Yep.
Finances and, sex. That's another one.
Yeah.
And so... But I think that, during that time, we had to figure out what our safe word was going to be. And I want to talk about safe words because you're right. When things are so high, it's like, I'm not listening to you. You're not listening to me. We're going to be screaming or shouting over each other. So why bother? Mm-hmm. And now that we have little kids, I feel like we've had that personal agreement that we're not, sometimes things happen and then emotions get wild, but one of us knows when to say a safe word. So Brave Table fam, if you're listening to this and you don't have a safe word with your partner, maybe that's one of the things that you figure out today is, what is that safe word? Mm-hmm. I know that now we have one even with Ari.
Yep.
Like if we are on our phones, he'll say, pineapple pizza. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, okay, I know that he needs my attention now. Mm-hmm. Pineapple pizza, mama. Okay, I'm off my phone. Mm-hmm. And with us, it's been Hakuna Matata.
Yep.
for years now, actually since we started our journey together. And I feel like that has been probably the biggest shift for any relationship that, I've been in. And I think that for us now we're trying to teach Isla to have a safe word, but it's not going to happen. She's 2.5. Yet I think that even when you're sharing about these brave conversations, in order to repair and reconcile, we have to be courageous to actually bring the thing up without, coming from that place of, I feel resentful, or I feel hurt, or I feel angry. What would you say about that?
I agree, and I think most fights are pure emotions. It's got no rationale in there. It's completely emotional, and that's why it needs to be paused. For you to get into your rational mind and go, what's actually important, and why are we even fighting? And often, at least in my experience, what I've found is what you're fighting about is what is not actually the fight. The fight is actually something else completely. And that's why the resolve process that we have, and much thanks to you to come up with the resolve process or work on the resolve process with me, is to say, okay, let's first experience as to what are you experiencing because of which you're even fighting. Like
Because
as a
it's
person,
your
like personally to you.
experience,
Yeah,
right?
personally to
You're
you,
going to
yeah.
have your own experience, and I need to be mindful and respectful for your experience.
Yeah.
It might be completely opposite to what I was experiencing,
Yeah.
but I still need to honor that was your experience. Now, I love this episode so much because Ajit and I have been in relationship for now, we've been married 7 and we are going on 8 years together. And we've had rocky roads. We both have been married before, and we both have a dedicated time at the end of the year where we have our own deep reflection. And it's kind of like what you would do in a strategy meeting for your team or your business or with your managers in your office, etc. You would do this for your relationship. And we do this now because we do business together, and we also have a family together. We have kids together. So we do this separately now. We have one day that's just for a relationship, and we have one day just for our kind of like family goals. And then the third day is for our business goals and what we want to do kind of separately together and what feels most expansive. But I think it is so vital, especially when we are navigating towards getting closer in relationship. And every relationship is going to go through its peaks and its valleys. And if you are navigating something that you keep just putting under the rug, well, that episode 228, is going to give you so many powerful tools that Ajit and I have learned over the years of lots of fighting, lots of conflict resolution, lots of repair that I think oftentimes we forget. And if you are somebody that's navigating maybe closure or needing to perhaps have that space, or perhaps maybe you think, oh my gosh, we fight so much. Am I doing the wrong thing? Is this relationship ever going to come out on the other side? Just know that every relationship, if you can learn how to fight in a healthy manner, you are winning. Most relationships do not know how to fight. Most relationships do not know how to have conflict resolution. And that is one of the keys here, is navigating and understanding each other, and also having a safe word, which we talk about as well. And I will link that also in the show notes. Now, number 2, episode 236, the truth about forever relationships and what we are getting wrong. Woo, so good. So we both had aligned visions and missions. And so getting into this section, how do you know? How do you know if you have a winner? How do you know if you have a winner? How do you know if the relationship that you have right now is a forever relationship? Well, I know one thing's for sure, and with so many of the experts we've had on, 230 episodes, what I've learned from so many of these amazing experts, who some of them I like to call my dear friends, is there isn't a forever relationship. Ooh, there is not a forever relationship. We learned this from Mark Groves and Kylie, which we'll link their episode in the show notes. They talk about liberated love. We've learned a lot from them. And I've known Mark as a personal friend for 10 years plus. And it's something that it's so true. We think that, oh, this is our prized possession. And this is what we're getting wrong in relationship. We think, oh, we think how our parents thought. And maybe a relationship isn't going to be forever. But can we have an intention? Can we have an intention? And that was something that Ajit and I did early on. I don't know what is forever, because what I've learned, even in my processing and experience of tremendous loss, we can't be attached to life. As the Buddha says, impermanence, and teaches impermanence. What we have tomorrow, or what we have today, we might not have tomorrow. So let's be present and let's really savor it, and let's really allow ourselves to really enjoy and bear the fruits of that. And that's what's so special. It may not be tomorrow, but can we enjoy it and have fun and experience that for today? And that's why you'll feel like I am so passionate about connection, and I'm so passionate about celebrating life. And because there's so many years where I just couldn't. So many years where the universe was testing in hospital visits, in relationships, in really, really dark relationships, to say, actually, you've arrived and you can create joy even in some dark moments. And so even if you are contemplating, is this relationship the one? Is this relationship a forever relationship? How do I know? The thing is there's no such thing as a forever relationship. Maybe past versions of your relationship need to die. Ding, 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 ding. Past versions of your relationship need to die out, to rebirth, to birth new iterations of your relationship. Ajit and I, in the past, we got together really fast. And so we are celebrating our 7 years together. And people have asked, what have you done differently? Because you started to have a family right away. And we started to have not only family right away, but we started multiple different businesses. We've moved several different times, different places cross country, globally. We've lived around the world. And by no means we are relationship experts, but the thing that we are committed to is we are committed to a solid vision. Like we've shared in the episode of he and I recently on the Brave Table, which we'll also link in the show notes. And the biggest thing for us is to have and be okay with letting parts of our relationship die off to grow into new ones. And you can say, well, how do you even do that? Well, here's how we do it. We have our own intention setting. You might have an intention setting practice or intentions for the new year. Every year you make New Year's intentions, or you have a new word. We have our 6-month intention check-ins every 6 months. And this has been great because it really solidifies, all right, where are we at? Checking in what each other needs, checking in what is coming up in this phase of our relationship. And I will share, and I share this on the episode with him as well, we had a really, really, really rocky few years when we moved from LA to Austin. We were remodeling a house. No, try not to do that with a partner. And if you do, that is one of the biggest spiritual growth practices that you can do, because it brings up all of the unearthing and the programming and the subconscious programming, because you're dealing with contractors and money and your space and your sacred space, and also your children who are being born at the same time. And we had so many different things happening that we really needed to take a closer look. And boy, that was the fire. And we were in the fire. And it was a lot of blaming. It was a lot of not taking personal responsibility, where we were really met with uncomfortable discussions and patience and allowing and surrendering to the heat and seeing what that heat would turn into. if we were allowing it to turn into something magical. And it took some time. Oh, it took some time. And so, how do you know if you have a winner? So, the first thing is, are you both committed to something higher than yourselves? What is your individual dharma and your life's purpose, your own truth? Do you have an individual dharma, and do you have a united vision? What is your vision of your relationship that you want to have together? You have to have an individual one, and you have to have a vision for yourself. And you're thinking, well, I've never even thought of that. Well, this is great. Maybe this is something that you can practice. The second thing, how to know if you have a winner, is, are they coming from a place of curiosity, or is everything a dysfunctional discussion where you are avoiding each other for a week, not talking to each other? You blow up, combust, and you don't have a way of repairing and reconciling. You think the worst of each other. These are red flags. Winners in relationship are like, okay, you see the differences. You can agree to disagree. You maybe have a safe word when things are getting heated. You have carved out time, if not every 6 months, if not every month, perhaps once a year, at the very, very least once a year, to realign and see where your values are, to check in and to see, how are we supporting each other in life, in business, in career, in finances, with children? Do we want to have children? There was a time where Ajit and I, were very much on different levels. He didn't want to get married. And I was like, well, if I'm going into a long-term relationship, I really would love to. I'm looking for my king. And then when I heard, when he had shared that he doesn't feel like he's ready for it, that was something for me to process and say, okay, you know what? This is where we're at. And then slowly and steadily, he came around to it, and he had his own processing for it. Okay, so I'm spilling the chai on this here because this is so important. We think that in relationship, we have to do everything. And what I've learned is that we don't have to do everything in relationship. Relationship is not meant to be doing everything together. And if you are in one of those relationships where, I know if you're in the honeymoon stage and it's new and it's juicy and you forget all of your friends, we all know, and we all have friends like that, you will realize that you've got to keep your own individuality. And then on the other hand, I know that some people are so definitely and desperately afraid, or deadly afraid, of being one in relationship, because either they have their own wounds that they haven't worked through yet. And so I think trying to find that balance of being separate and also finding things that you do as a couple is so important. And when you are able to come together and figure out what are some of the things that you enjoy separately, like for me, my girlfriends, they are my girls that will give me that emotional support when I want to vent, when I want to talk about the latest things in fashion or travel and things like that. And I know that there are my girlfriends that are going to be game for this. On the other hand, with my husband, he loves talking about vision and envisioning 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years from now. And he is my partner for that, because we also are very like-minded in where we want to go for our careers, business-wise, how we want to raise our kids, but also what we're building together and what our relationship entity as its own entity is building on its own. Again, separate and together. So that is definitely a juicy episode if you want to go back to that one fully. Okay, number 3, episode 245, how self-love transforms your relationships, attracting the right people with Sanaiyah Gurnamal. Oh my goodness, mic drop. This episode was so good, and it was so good on so many levels. Sanaiyah is a top relationship coach. She has one of the top podcasts in Manila in the Philippines, and she has had many of her work also in different parts of the world. But what she talks about is you can't really attract someone else unless you have that love for yourself. And it's such a big reminder when we try to pass on that responsibility to other people. We just can't. We have to own it for ourselves. We are the only ones responsible for the relationships that we are attracting in our life. So the good, the bad, the ugly, the chaotic, the same patterns from the people that we were trying to receive love from when we were a child will then show up in our adult relationships in partners. So if you were trying to get love from that emotionally unavailable father, but then you now have attracted a partner, she has such a good point of it's not going to come from anybody else. It's going to come from you. And if you are not fully aware of how to do this or give this to yourself, give this to him or her, give this to the little girl or the little boy that still needed that, then this is the episode that you must dive into. There's a lot of amazing pointers there, and I can listen to Sanaiyah speak all day long. I just absolutely love what she is all about.
Society has taught us that it's always more acceptable, or it is better to focus on other people. We have this whole idea of sacrificing yourself for others, for example.
Especially in the East.
Especially in the East, especially in the culture that I come from. It's always about other people. And almost if you're going to focus on yourself, it's selfish, right? And so people grow up feeling bad about doing anything for themselves. They feel guilty. They feel it's wrong, right? It's always about the greater good. It's always about, the family, the community, other people, even at work, every situation, you're always thinking about other people. And at the end of the day, you're neglecting yourself, which makes you feel drained and exhausted and resentful and angry. And, you can't be feeling all those things and helping other people. So it's kind of like working against you in so many aspects. I struggled for a good part of my life. I think up until my 30s, relationships were really tough. Many aspects of my life were a struggle.
Like love relationships?
Love relationships.
Okay.
Oh my God, I had really the worst relationships. History, I'm sure you can relate, but a lot of pain, a lot of being on an emotional roller coaster, the wrong kind of relationships. Every time I was in love with somebody, they didn't like me back. And if they loved me, I was like, this is not for me. So it was always a mismatch, a lot of tears, a lot of drama, all of that. And so I pretty much gave up on love. And I said, I am going to dedicate my life to, my work, to the center, to well-being, to healing, all kinds of different modalities that were calling to me at that time. And I thought that was pretty much going to be how life goes, where it's just me, because I had some really painful, traumatic experiences over time that made me feel like, maybe I'm better off on my own.
Yeah.
Okay. But, everything took a big turn in my life when I started doing the work and I started owning and taking responsibility for everything that was happening in my relationships. And I realized it's not them, it was me. I kept thinking that I would attract men, like the bad boys, right? The ones who never wanted to commit.
Oh, you were the bad boy
I
kind
was
of
the bad
girl?
boy
Okay.
kind of girl.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
always had my heart broken, always chasing the wrong guy, right?
Were you the fixer as well?
I was also the fixer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they would change for me.
Don't we all?
Right?
Don't we all?
And it was a pretty big wake-up call when I realized, hey, it's not them. It's me. And it wasn't them with the commitment issue. It was me, because I was afraid of love. And I was so afraid of love that I would constantly attract the wrong kind of person just to tell myself, hey, look, this is why you don't want to be in a loving relationship, because it always goes bad. There's going to be pain. You're never going to be happy. And so I kept reinforcing this notion that love was something I had to avoid at all costs. Though consciously, I had my picture of happily ever after, and, I was such a romantic, and, I loved all those kind of rom-coms with those happy endings, and secretly wished it would happen to me. But it didn't for a very long time. But it was when I realized that, oh my God, it's not them, it's me. And it goes way back. It goes back to things that I observed or witnessed in childhood. It goes back to people that I've grown up around. It goes back to all my broken-hearted relationships. And there was a lot to unpack, but it was very empowering to realize that it wasn't something that I couldn't control because it was me all along. Oh. And that was the wake-up call.
Now, the next tip, episode 215, number 4, is finding freedom from codependency with Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath. Now, when we understand this most essential concept, this is huge. And these two are rock stars in their field. Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath wrote a beautiful book earlier this year that just launched this year. And I was also on Mark Groves' podcast, and we'll link that one also in the show notes. But they navigate this idea of codependency and really understanding if you are in a codependent relationship and when it's actually a red flag, when we know we are getting enmeshed in relationship and we are not individuating for a healthy, sovereign space in ourselves that we can call home. And this really is a reminder of what we can learn about ourselves through these relationship patterns and through these relationship dynamics, and when to either end a relationship, when to know that a relationship is not worth salvaging, and when to begin moving forward. Okay, moving on to this phenomenal episode. This was episode 224, How Balancing Masculine and Feminine Energies Can Revolutionize Society, with Teal Swan. She is a masterful queen when it comes to talking about the masculine and the feminine. And I don't know about you, but many times on the Brave Table, we've talked about how if we haven't been met in relationship, how can we soften into our feminine? If we've had to, maybe if we grew up fast or we had to be in that provider role of carrying on these masculine traits, and maybe you're wanting to be more in your feminine. Maybe you're wanting to soften into your feminine, but you aren't able to. Or maybe you're that person in relationship where you are now emasculating your partner. How does that actually go hand in hand? And she gives us these beautiful tips on how we can truly understand where each side is actually coming from and what tools that we can use in the process. I feel like a lot of people who are listening and maybe even watching this on YouTube is thinking to themselves, what do I want in a man now? What am I looking for in a man now? Who do I need to be to find that person? And what is my relationship with my femininity?
Yeah,
so can we unpack all of that?
Oh yeah, this could take us quite a while. Well, right now, humanity in general, especially in the younger generations, millennial and below, are redefining relationship. So we've been, in the older generations, born into this template, and that template no longer fits with society. So we've evolved essentially out of what worked. So a lot of people are confused as to why that template doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you changed all the things that made it work. Did it really work? We were asking those types of questions. So we're at the drawing boards with what we want relationships to look like. And it's natural that if so much of the structure of our relationships was dependent upon genders, then if we're uprooting the entire structure of relationships in general, we are also uprooting our relationship to our genders.
And what is that role as a modern female now navigating through this?
Oh, right now it's a nightmare. Right now, I really honestly feel like it's a nightmare for men too, but I really do wish that I could convey that right now is not a fun time to be living as a modern female. It's not going to be.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, because we aren't quite transitioned out of the old expectations, stereotypes, biases, and yet we're in this new territory. It was interesting as I was just reading this study this morning. Popped up out of nowhere,
Right.
Of course, because I was coming here, but it popped across, my feed, this story about a research that they were doing. It was reported on NPR about the fact that, women are now, if you compare them to men, they're making nearly the same amount of money, and yet the responsibilities for the household are still completely unequal in terms of what is expected and required and is done by them, which is something that I definitely see echoed no matter where I go in the modern world. It's this frustration from women emanating of, I guess I have to do everything now.
Yeah. You know, there's the whole idea of the mom guilt.
Oh yeah.
Well, which we'll dive into in a moment. But even before that, because I remember, you know, there was, and I just posted something even on my IG maybe a couple days ago around me marrying myself, actually in Bali, did the whole thing. This was 9 years ago after my divorce. And it was my commitment to me. And it was very much like, I'm going to just take care of me and not depend on a guy. And it was just, and of course I got this like a lot of backlash, but it was kind of to really point or highlight that, you know, once you start committing to you as a former people pleaser, as somebody who always put other people's needs first, this was my commitment to myself. And then this is kind of, I was able to kind of find my now co-pilot. But even in that took a lot of, what's this new balancing role and this balancing act? Because while I'm so feminine in my own right, I felt like there was a lot of the masculine that I was also carrying. So can you speak to that?
The reality is we still live in a world that is built by men for men. So naturally, whenever a woman steps into this type of society, and especially steps into a competitive workplace environment within the society, we could even say providing for oneself is doing that, regardless of how you're doing that. You compensate essentially with a masculine shield. You compensate by overdeveloping masculine traits and qualities. And so I don't know a single woman who's working, quote unquote, that isn't in this position. That means there has to be a lot of focus, conscious focus on developing femininity. And something I don't think most women want to swallow is that there are feminine traits which cannot exist outside of a masculine container. Nobody wants to hear that, right? It makes you feel powerless, but there are a great many traits that do not exist without a container for the feminine. So if you're lacking that, and society is not really providing that outside the context of a relationship, which it used to, then you're forced to bring forth the elements of feminine that do not need a container to exist. But there's no way you're going to feel as good in your body. So,
because then you just try to do it all. And what are some of the repercussions of that?
We're about to see a fertility crisis on a level which most people could not fathom. And if a fertility crisis wasn't bad enough, there's a great many people who are just going to be flat out making the decision, why the hell would I have children? On top of that, you're going to see a lot of cancers in women, a lot of breast cancers. You're going to be seeing musculoskeletal issues because of the armoring that goes on in a female's body.
And let's unpack the cancers in women, because obviously for the audience, I mean, they may not know why that may be a emotional manifestation.
Let's talk about cancer. Cancer is an interesting internal antagonist because cancer, you can think of this as a part of self that is so sick of you doing things in a specific way that aren't working or isn't working, that it essentially plays an internal zero-sum game and says, change or die. It's basically up to you. I've been telling you I don't like this. So cancer is actually a very, very powerful ally. But most people, of course, don't see it that way. And it's not a surprise that it doesn't feel that way, because when you really realize what it is that cancer itself is trying to get you to change about your life and your lifestyle specifically, you'll understand why it's so difficult for people to overcome cancer. Because it usually comes up against almost like the holy grail of the way you operate in life. And with women specifically, a lot of that is around self-sacrifice, which is the relationship to the breasts. Of course, this coincides with the inundation in our environment and within society of, just the incredible lack of health with which we have designed things. We've got pesticides in the foods. We've got, hormones going straight into the water. Do I need to keep going? You get the point, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that, we are living in a time where absolutely, I mean, just to even recap, there's a lot stacked, against women. And for those who are looking kind of in their next chapter, their next season of life, a new breakup, a new iteration of themselves, maybe reinventing themselves, I love that you kind of explain the difference between the feminine and the masculine roles and the expectations. There's one thing that you talk about, which is, the masculine clamshell. And I came across this and we're like, all right, let's spill the chai on this. What do you mean by that?
Okay, if you think about a clamshell, it's this protective kind of a buffering, positive ownership type of energy and dynamic that it has with that soft muscle on the inside. I usually use the example of a pearl as opposed to that soft muscle on the inside. You could really use either. Let's go with pearl because it's the one I'm always talking about, right? So if the feminine is like a pearl inside of that clamshell is holding and containing and protecting and sometimes nourishing what's inside of that shell. When the feminine has that strong masculine container is when it can come into its full power. And that full power for the feminine is, things like receptivity. When a woman is in her power, she's completely open. That level of openness is what allows her to bring forth life. It enhances creativity massively. I mean, she just becomes like a vessel through which the universe flows in that state. As opposed to when she's without that clamshell where there's an automatic contraction and you see a decrease in the creativity. You see an armoring in general. You see her creative centers and also energetic, intuitive centers closing down so as to respond to a harsh environment.
Because she doesn't have that.
Exactly.
That clamshell. She has to become it.
Now, I realize that I'm on slippery territory here because those of us who are living now are a byproduct of, the feminist movement, which obviously existed for a very powerful reason. Anybody who doesn't think so should just go back to the 1950s. But still, I mean, we need to be talking about some of the detriments that came with that movement, and this is a big one of them, is that we've lost the truth about the way that femininity exists because of the amount of pain that so many of the women in those eras were in relative to men. They were like, they moved towards, we don't need you, period, the end, we can exist without you, and that is not true.
Right. All right. My final one for this mashup series is, again, coming from episode 215, Finding Freedom from Codependency with Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath. I mean, just beautiful. This is probably a masterclass, I would say, in codependency. But this idea, and Ajit and I, kind of have something similar that we do. If we are in conflict, or if we knew or know that the other person with 2 kids and their energies and their possibilities of not having, perhaps maybe having a bad day or them not being fully resourced to hear something. And if I am wanting to vent or dump or emotionally dump on my partner who also had a big day, who also came home, who's also tired, who's also probably sitting in traffic, didn't eat, but then I want to scream at him or yell at him because he left the dishes in the dishwasher or he left his dirty sock or whatever it is, but he's not fully resourced, and we don't even ask the question, are you resourced to hear this? That is one of the saving graces, honestly, in our relationship. And I know that Kylie and Mark Groves talks about this a lot in their relationship. And the thing is, it's a simple question that we can ask. And oftentimes we're not taught this. And it's a question because we're honoring the reverence of our partner who perhaps maybe also has a say when we actually can come up with conflict resolution. And so if you are one that emotionally dumps, maybe not just on your partner, but maybe on your friends, on the people that work with you, on the closest people to you, on your parents, on your kids, what do you need in order to A, emotionally regulate better, and B, they talk here about some of the things which I love so much that I think would be so palpable for you in your relationships.
In a relationship, a guy crying is not seen as something that a quote unquote secure man does, yet we're desperate for it, yet we don't create safety for it. You know, we shame what is not that, and then we actually shame when it is that. So we're stuck in this strange paradox that you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, but you're probably safer to remain unemotional and guarded.
Because it's easier. And that's what society has primed us to do. We go back to
Right.
our same roles. I want to segue into kind of you both kind of talking about this, the second part of the book, which is the sacred pause. So can you talk about what you actually mean? Like, does everyone listening to this need to say, all right, I need to take a break up, pause? And what are some ways that what that pause can actually look like for ourselves?
Yeah, I think a lot of like my resistance when we first were writing the framework of the book to the sacred pause was the fact that I was projecting onto people that people would be afraid of, like, oh, this means we have to break up, and so I'm so happy you're asking that question, because what it really means, and maybe it just sounds better when Esther Burrell says it because she has a beautiful accent, but she says, like, get divorced and stay together, you know, and and what we're really saying is whether you're single, in a relationship, what we're asking is to let the old, first through the book you discover, like, what are the masks you wear, what are the blind spots you have, where did you learn how to love the way you love. If you're in a relationship, you navigate this book together, you're now getting context to each other's defense strategies, to the ways that you source safety. And so now there's like aha moments going on. You're starting to learn so much more about what made your partner the way they are, what made you the way that you are, why you're drawn to each other, which is usually because you're trying to actually unconsciously resolve relationship challenges from your childhood that need to be resolved to get to the next level of a relationship, liberated love. And so the container that we're talking about of a sacred pause is saying, let's make some agreements. Let's actually take a pause because we need a space between. And if you think about it, it's like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It's like there is a time where everything needs to be reorganized, and what didn't work can't stay to actually, and we don't want it to. And so the pause is saying, let's be intentional about this, you know, and actually saying, like, hey, neither of us are actually super happy or super free in this relationship. How do we actually create a relationship that's about bringing both of us alive, and that's in service of both of us, to our children, to, because staying together just for your kids is not in service of your kids. You know, if you're going to stay together, do something about it. If you're going to depart, be graceful about it, right? Like, they're going to learn more about how you operate rather than staying together or not. And so the pause is really about not saying at the end of this pause, we need to stay together or we need to depart. We're not connected to people's relational outcomes. What we are saying is your relationship needs to be in service of what is true. You know, and if I say everyone who reads this has to stay together, then the book would have been written in a manipulative way. Instead, we're saying you might not. And we got to be with that. And that's okay. Because a lot of guidance is like, how do you stay together forever? And we're saying, actually, if you get intentional about this and actually talk about that, you both have paths. And it's not about abandoning your own path for the other person. It's about creating one where both of yours go alongside each other if possible. And you're being intentional about steering it. Most of us are like, well, you got to drive in the same car because we made a vow when we got committed. And now we resent our partner. We resent the vow. And that's not liberated love. That's a prison. What do you think?
I'm not here for that. That's what I think.
No.
I'm not interested in prisons or cages or anything that isn't liberated. Although it can be really comfortable to hang out there for a long time because it's, you know, quote unquote, what's been familiar. And that's what the container does. It creates space for us to break up with what was, to break up with normal, for us to examine our unconscious patterning.
Yeah.
and connect with what's underneath all of that. So a lot of grief work, a lot of processing, a lot of reconnecting to our rage, our anger, things that we've been disconnected from for our own survival for a very long time. And in that process of doing this work, of taking a intentional, like Mark said, intentional pause, allows us to sit with everything that's operating underneath instead of just going along the way it's been going. It's like, no, we're actually going to hit a pause button. And this looks a myriad of different ways. It can be like, okay, for 4 months, every single week, we're going to meet with a therapist if we're in a relationship. We might take sex off the table because we notice that we're sourcing safety or connection through sex, when really we need to be having more intimate conversations to create a deeper a level of emotional intimacy. For those of us that are single, it's no dating, no seeking, no searching, no sexting, no dating apps, to actually intentionally hit a pause to notice where all of that energy is going. Usually it's directed outwards, and direct all of that energy back inwards so that we can create that internal foundation of self-trust we need to be able to access more discernment and choice in our relationships.
All right. So I hope you truly learn from these incredible episodes. These were some of my favorite on relationships this past year. And whether you are navigating the season solo, whether you are navigating a breakup, a heartbreak, a loss, a season of transition, or maybe it's just maybe you're also figuring out how to navigate difficult and brave conversations in your own love relationships. These 7 have been so vital this year, and I think you're going to really enjoy them and go deeper in them. And I've linked them all for you in the show notes to go deeper. So happy holidays. And if you are curious about getting your own That Suck Now What bundle, you can actually go to thatsucknowwhat.com and you can input holiday for 15% off on everything. That'll be going on until the new year. I am so thankful for you. I'm so grateful. When you spend your days with your family members, don't forget to be just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And if this sparked any sort of new perspective with you, please comment below. Would love to know which one was your favorite all year, and was there something that we missed? Please add that also in the comments. Tag us on the Break Table on Instagram at Neeta Bhushan, as well as if you are following us on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the thumbs up button. It helps us grow the show more than you know, and I promise to give you even more valuable content in 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.